Well, judging from the slew of downvotes on my last video, I'm guessing that I won't be talking about any more negative Comic Con panels, or at least not in as great of detail. And I kind of knew that going in to the Batman Superman Dawn of Justice. I kind of knew that it was going to have a lot of fans, probably the same people who liked Man of Steel. Um, but considering how big a fan I am of those characters, I just figured, well, I might as well talk about the upcoming movie. I just felt obligated, considering how long I have been a fan of Batman and Superman, and to a lesser extent Wonder Woman. So, so with that being said, it's time to talk about something more positively. That something being, of course, Season 3 of Arrow. The Arrow panel basically consisted of showing a preview of numerous other characters and storylines from Season 3, as well as an extensive Q&A session with the cast and creators of Arrow. I believe who was there? There was Guggenheim. There was Mark Guggenheim, Andrew Kreisberg, Greg Berlanti, Stephen Amell, David Ramsey, Willa Holland, John Barrowman, Paul Blackthorne, Colton Haynes. Who else? I think that was it. Okay, so obviously you have a pretty big turnout. Yeah, you're missing potentially significant characters like Katie Cassidy and Emily Bett Rickards, but I guess you take what you can get. The panel itself, the moderator, I don't think afforded quite enough time to actually letting the audience ask questions. Really only the last 10-15 minutes or so was devoted to questions. With that, however, the moderator himself did ask pretty legitimate questions. He did, it wasn't just all praise. He did ask relatively hard-hitting questions about what can we expect from Season 3, taking this into account, how will this storyline progress, so on and so forth. So I didn't really have too many complaints about the panel itself. The stars and the producers seemed happy to be there. They seemed happy to communicate with the fans. They seemed pretty open, and I really got the sense that if they were allowed to tell you something, that they were very open to it. Right from the beginning, I've always kind of admired Stephen Amell's dedication to the role, not just physically, but also thinking to himself, how can I not screw this up? Because this is obviously a very well-loved character from a very well-known comic book series, and I really don't want to disappoint anyone who is watching this portrayal. So Stephen Amell obviously has made himself very accessible, and he's obviously carved out a pretty likable persona for himself in trying to communicate with the fans and trying to convey his own expectations and his own gratitude for the chance to play the Green Arrow. You also get the sense of that with the other cast members, but I think it's much more apparent with the star Stephen Amell. So with that being said, let's talk about some of the changes to Season 3. Well, obviously in the Island flashbacks, they're not going to be Island flashbacks at this point. And it has been said earlier seasons that those 5 years were not completely spent on the island. They were also spent in other locations, and it looks like one of those locations is Hong Kong. And if anyone remembers my feelings on the Season 2 finale of Arrow, I really liked it, but but I just really hated the fact that they. I just really hated the fact that they blatantly sequel baited us with those last 15 minutes. So, I realized that was kind of that seems kind of juvenile in retrospect, but imagine you are waiting for the Arrow season finale, and then you get about 30 minutes of finale and then 15 minutes of setup for the next season. I just wish we had gotten. I just wish we had gotten 40 minutes of finale and then maybe 5 minutes of setup for next season. Although, what can you do? Paul Blackthorne's inclusion at the panel, as well as some hints he dropped, indicated that yeah, Detective Lance was probably going to make it through whatever chest condition that he was supposedly going through at the end of season 2. It'll be interesting to see where he falls in the Starling City police force after surviving 2 attempts to destroy the city. But the creators did say regarding going back to the island stuff, the creators did say that it will be kind of refreshing to not have to have another bad guy has found the island and is trying to destroy Oliver and his friends. We haven't seen that before, so this will definitely allow us to change up the dynamic a little bit. Excuse me. Particularly with the inclusion of Amanda Waller, who it has been mentioned several times that Oliver knows personally, and so we'll get to finally see some light shed on that relationship and how they came to be acquainted with one another. Blah blah blah. And obviously, he doesn't have Shadow or Slade to fall back on. He is completely on his own. He doesn't even have Sarah on the island anymore. However, speaking of that, I'm really glad that Katie Lotz is coming back. Judging by the trailer, it seems like they're gradually trying to work toward the relationship between Green Arrow and Black Canary that comic book fans are used to. Where they have this almost this very jokey dynamic between them. So seeing Katie Lotz crack a few jokes in the preview saying I haven't been gone that long. Kind of tells me that they're once again, and this is also I also got this from what they said at the panel. They're kind of gradually starting to work towards the Green Arrow from the comics. The more lighthearted Green Arrow who is less Batman-esque. And I think the gradual route is the way to go, honestly, because so many comic book heroes in media these days are really dark, particularly in the DC universe, because Man of Steel, they went the dark route. Batman, they went the dark route. However, I felt it was appropriate with Batman. It seems like with Wonder Woman, they're going very grim, dark. So to see them initially start out with being this very Dark Knight trilogy-esque Green Arrow character, and then gradually going toward the more lighthearted Green Arrow character, and kind of seeing that transition, I think is the way to go. And potentially, if they do it right, this might pave the way for more lighthearted DC superheroes that are not quite as pretentious in their approach. I don't know. That's just me speculating out loud. But I also have to comment on some of the big changes and some of the new characters. For example, Roy is now full on sidekick. He has mentioned in the past that he does not want to be called Speedy. That, coupled with the fact that Speedy is Oliver's nickname for Thea, he's not going to be called Speedy. He's going to be called Arsenal. Okay, and I have seen Colton Haynes in the costume. He looks really good. I'm really a big fan of the fact that it kind of looks like, it really looks like it comes from the same. It comes from the same person who made the Oliver Queen Green Arrow costume. It just happens to be red, and there are small aesthetic differences to it, but bottom line, it looks like it comes from the same make as the Green Arrow outfit, which is appropriate. It looks equally as practical. It looks like he can really move around. So it'll be interesting to see that that dynamic continue to build between Oliver and Roy, especially since now Roy is not completely roided out on Mirakuru. So there's that. I'm really a big fan of the costume, and also the slew of new characters that are being introduced, because they've announced that they're gonna redo Count Vertigo. Well, not redo him, but Peter Stormare is going to come into the show for at least one episode. I don't really know how prominent a character he will be. I don't know if he'll be a recurring villain or what, but Peter Stormare is going to come into the show as the second iteration of Count Vertigo. Now, personally, I did not like Count Vertigo in this show. He was played by Seth Gable, and yeah, I just thought he was definitely one of the hammier villains. I didn't really think he was all that menacing. Seth Gable is not really a bad actor per se. I just think they completely missed the mark on Count Vertigo. I didn't really think... He just seemed like a tiny little ant who didn't really have any legitimate chance of besting the Green Arrow, at least in this iteration. And Count Vertigo, this is someone who... Let me just give you some perspective. This is someone who was previously voiced by, I believe, Malcolm McDowell on that animated short film that DC Animation, that Warner Brothers Animation did a few years back. So you take someone voiced by Malcolm McDowell, and you cast him as this GQ looking guy. I don't know, but Peter Stormare, I think is going to be a much better fit for the role of Count Vertigo. It'll be nice to see Peter Stormare in a role that potentially actually has some depth, because like I said in the video I made about Heat Stroke, I am so tired of Peter Stormare getting these one-dimensional bad guy roles. And they've also announced that they're going to introduce Wildcat at some point. They've definitely said that they're going to introduce Katana, who Oliver interacts with in Hong Kong in the flashback scenes. So on one hand, introducing all of these characters, Wildcat, Katana, you could possibly be overstretching your bounds in terms of how many heroes, how many comic book characters you want to have on the show. I mean, if you have too many characters, you could run the risk of it's this character. Who was he again? You could run the risk of actually causing them to get shortchanged, having these little one-episode stints. So it could end up a mess. And that's assuming that you even nail the character as it should be, because I particularly was not a huge fan of the way they handled the Huntress. I didn't think Jessica DeGoe's performance was all that great as the Huntress. Like I said, she was another one of those hammier villains, less grounded in sympathy. But introducing Katana and Wildcat, of course, you run the risk of portraying them wrong, but also you run the risk of the audience being unable to connect with these heroes that you could potentially only have for, again, these one-episode stints. I don't really know how prominent Wildcat is going to be in the grand scheme of things. Oh, and Robbie Amell as Firestorm in The Flash. This is kind of diverging from the Arrow discussion a little bit, but Robbie Amell has been cast as Firestorm in The Flash. I mean, it seems like every other day they're casting a new comic book character in these shows, which is fine on paper, but again, is it really going to pan out the way they want? So there's that, but also on the positive note, introducing all of these different characters really does give the impression of this larger universe that you are trying to build. So having Wildcat there, having Katana there, you really could make the audience feel like they are in the DC universe. However, again, a potential disadvantage of that is you could potentially lose the more grounded feeling that you were trying to establish in the first season. The grittier Dark Knight trilogy-esque atmosphere that you were going for. So it's this very fine line that they're going to have to walk with several of these characters. I don't even know who they're going to cast as Wildcat. Personally, I would go with Stephen Lang, but that's just me, and that's just off the top of my head. Yeah, it's. But as for the storylines that they're going to tease in season 3, I previously mentioned that how are they going to top season 2? That's what I was wondering, because season 2, in my opinion, just blew season 1 out of the water. I mean, it had an awesome villain in the form of Slade Wilson. It had several game-changing moments. The acting was more confident. The stakes were raised. The storylines were definitely more in the convention of a seasonal arc, whereas a recurring problem in the first season was the episodic feeling of several storylines. However, season 3 is actually giving me a little bit of hope because, like I said, they're following up on some of the stuff that they started hinting at the end of season 2, like the whole Oliver Felicity thing. Personally, maybe it's just my inner guy speaking, but the whole romance thing doesn't really do much for me. I think it's kind of like Leonard and Penny's relationship in The Big Bang Theory. I like The Big Bang Theory still, but the whole Leonard and Penny thing at this point has become just so played out. They have been on and off again so many times. They have been teased and separated so many times that there's really not much in the way of new ground that they can break aside from what happened at the end of the most recent season where they got engaged. So I think if they keep going back and forth on the whole Oliver Felicity thing, just to supposedly please fans and to whet fans' appetites, I don't really think you can keep that going for long. I think at some point some solid foundation or solid ground has to be reached in this particular storyline. But aside from that, the whole Diggle becoming a father thing and how that could potentially affect his team dynamic, I think could be a potentially fascinating storyline, especially considering with Diggle having a kid, he has so much more to lose than anyone else on the team, really. I mean, if he gets killed in action, then no one's going to be home, and his kid is going to grow up without a father. So throwing that monkey wrench into the equation, I think could be potentially really fascinating, and it could open the doors for this new conflicting dynamic between Oliver and Diggle, and finally they may give Diggle more to do than they did in the second season, which was, in my opinion, one of the only significant problems with it. So yeah, I don't really have too much else to say. The panel itself, I thought was very friendly. The people involved looked happy to be there. They seemed willing to answer questions. They seemed excited to be back for season 3. They seemed grateful to the fans. And season 3 itself, it seems like they showed just enough to whet our appetites without necessarily giving too much away. I enjoyed the fact that they actually did give some information on upcoming storylines without necessarily going into kind of spoilerish specifics about it. And yeah, season 3 of Arrow, I'm looking forward to it more now than I was at the end of season 2, which, hey, I guess they accomplished their goal when they came to Comic-Con to get you excited for season 3. Worked on me.